I'm Lee Bristow, host of Saros Insights and Director of Cyber and AI Governance. At Saros, we partner with the world's most recognized brands to make the complex simple. My aim is to deconstruct the strategies of Ireland's top business leaders, from AI governance, digital transformation, and some that are even scaling through acquisition. We're playing a bigger game, uncovering the human stories behind the technology. Welcome to our show. Declan, for listeners that may not know you yet, how would you best describe the work that you've been doing over the last decade? And what would be the silver threads that tie it all together?
Yeah, I think I'm a technologist at heart. I actually studied mechanical engineering and made my way into programming. And I think that's solving problems, technical challenges is what drives me. I like to work across different industries. I worked in telecommunications, aviation, healthcare, fintech. And yeah, I think overall it's just about solving problems and making the world a better place for people with technology.
And like if we dive into a little bit more, let's say since 2021, AI came along, and being somebody that likes challenges and likes to tinker a little bit, or tinker a lot, how has AI essentially changed the way that you've been doing your work?
I think the first thing, I suppose, that the first emotions I felt when I saw what ChatGPT could do was a mixture. And I was both excited about the power of the technology, but I'm also very involved in security and running a GRC program.
Yeah.
So the risks came to mind very quickly as well. So I had this sort of tension in my head around.
Did you have an existential crisis at the same time?
Maybe not so far as that, but I was absolutely thinking about both the pluses and the minuses and how we'd navigate that for the future.
So you mentioned the security piece, and I think that has been quite a big thread in our previous conversation. You standardized on ISO 27001 in terms of your organization and the products that you support and develop. 42001, which is the AI management system standard, was released in 2023, and you were one of the first organizations in an Irish context to go all the way through to certification. I would really love to get a view of where you found the most complicated pieces, especially moving or integrating 27001 with 42001, and what was some of the pitfalls and surprising wins?
Yeah, I guess as you said, the standard came out at the end of 23, so we had actually learned about the standard during our 27001 audit.
Okay.
The auditor, we were chatting over lunch and talking about AI, like everyone was chatting about ChatGPT at that time. And he said, "Oh, by the way, the guys are going to release a new standard around AI governance." So I was immediately interested in that. Knew it was something that we'd probably go for, although we'd no plan to get certified initially. But the first time I did, as soon as it became available, I bought the standard just to understand what it was involved in it, what the overlaps were with the other standards, and to really get a sense of what it would take to get that certification. I was actually pleasantly surprised. There's quite a bit of overlap. There's a lot of cross-cutting policies and controls. And prior to that, we had released a general AI policy in the company. We had started making people aware of the risks and how to, we had established a usage guide, an approved list of services that people could use, and gave some training on what type of information they could put into them. And we really wanted to extend that further, and we started doing AI impact assessments. We realized then we could do things like when we were reviewing our supplier management policy, it became very obvious we needed some extra questions in there, such as, what data is going in there? Would they potentially use it for model training? And that obviously became an important question to include in that.
Yeah.
So we kind of chipped away at it, adding extra little bits into our GRC program that just like focused on AI, made sure it aligned with the standard as we went along. And then I think it was maybe halfway through 24, our product team had been busy thinking of ways to integrate AI into our product suite, and started thinking about how we would do that. And the view then was to launch new products and start 25, launch AI-enabled products. And we really felt it'd be quite a differentiator if we could launch and have the certification at the same time. So that became the goal. I'd say halfway through 24, we sat down to gap analysis to see where we were versus standard, reached out to find a certifying body, and to start to lay the plan to get ourselves certified then at the start of 25. And just a few weeks ago, actually, we've been through our first annual surveillance audit. And so we managed to get through that okay, thankfully.
Congratulations. Were there any bullets sweated leading up to that, just making sure that...
No, I think we were well prepared this time. It was all good.
I mean, it is still very unique in an Irish context in terms of certified 42001 organizations. Aligning to the standard is becoming quite commonplace. But yeah, that is definitely an area where I think there is an opportunity around commercialization and creating that additional X factor, right?
Yes.
Prior to our conversation, you mentioned that your CEO had actually done a AI course, I believe, through Oxford.
That's correct, yes. He did an executive business diploma in AI. And so, yeah, he was very much bought into the vision around AI and what it could do for the company very early on. So, yeah, he took it upon himself to get schooled up in AI as much as possible. And we also have a very supportive board. That were very keen for us to explore all the options for how we could benefit from AI, how we could get a productivity boost internally, and then also how we could embed it in our product set. So we work in healthcare. There's a lot of sensitive data. There's patients' data, which is both identifiable and protected health information. So we had to make sure we process all that information correctly, and if we're passing it through AI, we need to make sure it covers all the ethical concerns. So yeah, the CEO, the board, and our chief product officer and myself really were the driving force of getting ourselves ready to be certified.
It doesn't state it directly within the standard, but leadership has to be part of that journey that is stated, right? It doesn't state the level, but having the board and the CEO as champions, it makes a massive difference.
Huge difference, absolutely huge. And we all at our town hall meetings, the CEO was mapping out the vision, making it very clear to everybody how we need to become an AI company. And it was very much about AI augmentation at the start, and now we're well through that, and we're starting to get into thinking about becoming an AI native company.
I think one of the challenges many organizations face is they often see governance as a roadblock to their vision, their strategy. I think what you're saying is that strategy flows from governance.
Yeah, I really don't agree with this narrative that some people say that that governance can block innovation or anything like that. I really don't think that's first of all, it's not a constructive way to think about it. We can, once you become informed of what the governance means, how to apply the controls in a pragmatic way, you can absolutely move fast, and you can innovate just as quickly as anyone else. And it's absolutely worthwhile spending the time and effort to make sure the governance is in place, because it builds trust around the products you sell, and it's people aren't going to come back wondering, how are you processing their data, and they really want to make sure that you've done everything right. So I think it just builds upon itself, builds upon the momentum. When you get that trust built with a customer, they'll want to come back for more.
Yeah. Developing software and medical devices, or being in the medical industry, right, and having a technology lens to it, you would typically have quality management systems in place. So having that embedded in the organization, that these are products that need to go into the market with the right kind of governance wrapped around it, did give you I think an edge in terms of that thinking. But I think every organization is now going to have to start thinking along those lines, given the regulations that are coming down the road in terms of the EU AI Act. Well, it's not even down the road, it's here. The EU AI Act and CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, are key product regulations that really kind of sharpen the focus on security, governance, controls, compliance going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's we were lucky in that we had a good baseline there to build on top of. For people who haven't really started that journey yet, they will have more work to do. So I think it's important that they get started as early as they can. It is relatively easy to get started. I think you just need to put a bit of focus on it, allocate some people to focus on it, and you can make a lot of progress in a short amount of time with if you are determined to do it, I guess, and allocate the right people to do it.
I think the leadership component is really important.
Oh, it is. It has to come down it has to be driven from the top. Absolutely.
Yeah. Was some of the thinking around the EU AI Act beyond the commercial elements of bringing a product to market with a 42001 stamp? Potentially, you've also got the EU AI Act coming down the road, and you're also going to need CE markings. Again, there may also be a requirement in terms of software as a medical device. I'm not sure in terms of the product lineup, but again, either way, there would be a high risk associated to applications in a medical sphere. So, were you also was that also part of your lens?
Yes and no. Our devices aren't actually medical devices because they're not used for clinical decision making. Our solution is patient facing.
Okay.
So we don't have to go through that certification. But absolutely, the EU Act was part of it. Like with all our GRC program, we take two lenses. I suppose when we look at it, we look at everything internally. Our internal network and the security around that, the data privacy of our internal data. And then obviously AI on top of that, and then the second lens is at our products and making sure we're covering all the bases from security, privacy, and governance. And most of our biggest market is actually the US, so we're covering the HIPAA is the biggest data privacy regulation over there that we have to deal with, and we also have Australian Privacy Act. And then Europe has obviously been the forerunner in AI regulation. Is something absolutely we need to be ready for here. We are selling our products into the Children's Hospital here in Ireland as well, so the EU Act does apply to us here as well.
And I think the EU Act is essentially the strongest baseline. Any sort of some of the regulations that are coming out of California, Colorado, New York, they all have derivatives thereof, but primarily focusing around bias mitigation, which is a very strong correlation to the EU AI Act, and then also transparency is also a very big theme across all of them, which is Article 50 from an EU AI perspective. So standardizing against the most strictest or stringent regulation, I'm sure will set you up very nicely.
Absolutely, yeah. Like even the GDPR is more stringent than most of the US regulations. So we've always aimed to go for the most stringent regulation, and then we're covered for all bases.
There is a thought process that having that additional rigor around things like the EU AI, CRA, GDPR, puts a stamp of quality on products coming out of Europe into the US that are going into the US. Do you find that is the case in the marketplace, and adding the 42001 just was, almost like the supreme seal?
Yeah, I think some people in the US will be more aware than others on the EU standards, but everyone's familiar with the ISO standards. So, they speak for themselves, I think.
That I would agree. Last kind of thought around the 42001 and the EU Act is alignment. So complying with ISO 42001 does not mean that you comply with the EU AI Act. Mainly because of the language, and then of course the specific controls that are listed within the EU AI Act don't necessarily align directly from a language perspective, so there needs to be nuance that is addressed there. But how did you find the support from 42001 in order to comply with the EU AI Act? Was there a strong synergy for you, or did it feel like you were doing double work?
We didn't feel like we did double work. I think once we understood what the requirements were, it felt like they aligned relatively easily for us. I would say I didn't have any issues, trying to cover both bases. It worked okay.
When we kind of delve a little bit deeper into the ecosystem of developing AI. So given the fact that at this point you can use AI for the development of software products pretty much from ideation to ongoing bug fixes, essentially, right? You can use it within that entire product lifecycle.
Yep.
Where do you feel organizations should be starting that journey? Because let's assume the governance is in place in terms of policies, process, and at the very least at a nascent level, but it's there. How would you suggest organizations approach this? Because very often you might have a lone ranger that is in the organization doing their own thing on a side laptop, etc., etc. So how do you bring it into the organization, especially in regulated businesses? How do you bring it in? How do you bring it in safely? And what is the path that you feel will provide the least resistance?
For us, the AI governance group, we got together and we mapped out the full software development lifecycle. Like we have the process mapped out, but we put it up on the whiteboard, and for each stage of the process, we just started noting down where we thought AI could augment the process.
Yeah.
All right. So we just listed all of the things out at the start, and that gave us a good sense of where the coverage was, and then we could start talking about where the value was, right? Because there was no point trying to just do things ad hoc. We really need to understand where the value was. And the other really important piece, I think, that some people maybe skip past is understanding the data and context you have over the whole process, right? So within each step of the process, within each team, they will have their own knowledge, and some of that is written down, some of it's in people's heads. You have to get it written down. So you have to get all that key knowledge written down so that the AI can read it and understand how that team works. The second, this was stream to think about in terms of context, is what is the context that flows with the process, right? So at the start, you'll have a PRD, product requirements document. That's going to flow into your architecture design. It's going to flow down to your development, your QA teams, and your deployment teams.
Yeah.
And you really need to map out what information needs to flow through, and you need to make sure that information is of very high quality.
Yeah.
Because if it's not good at start, it's going to degrade in quality as you get through the process. And by the time the QA team are QAing something, if there's a misunderstanding about what the actual requirements were early on, it's going to cause chaos.
Yeah.
So we put a big focus on that, and I think the place we put the most investment in was at the product status, right at the start of the process with the product team.
Okay.
They really took a different approach to how they write the PRD, and then how they do the work breakdown. And they have AI agents that do the work breakdown into the epic stories and tasks.
Yeah.
And making sure that the acceptance criteria are very high quality on the stories, and they also leverage other context that was written up about all the background information around the products, what they do, how they help patients and clinicians, so that there was as much information as possible available to the AI as it was documenting that early stage. And those artifacts then flow down through the process. If you get really good quality data there, it will help everything else flow. So I think that was a key learning for us that really, really benefited the process.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the tools, especially down into the actual deving tools, have had quite a lot of kind of inline support for I'd say the last 4 or 5 years or so, given that I'm not a developer and but having run dev teams and being a CTO and having worked with multiple development houses, seeing how those tools have developed over the last decade, you kind of saw how the advent of the framework really accelerated the deployment. The frameworks have now kind of almost become, let's say, augmentation of AI agents within themselves. And that is then leading on to the next evolution. I don't quite know what that evolution will be, but the point is that layer has been pretty well established as an area where AI can support. What hasn't really been is around that product ideation piece. And I think what you've just articulated is the way in which that can be the basis for really good operations all the way down to testing on the other side.
Absolutely. And yeah, like you said, the tools have advanced so much, the models have improved so much. MCP has made it so much easier to, all that context that I talked about, in making that readily available to all the AI tools in a secure way is incredibly important. The original MCP spec, when we all got it, I think everyone immediately recognized this is a really nice way of AI getting access to information and tools, but the original spec had literally nothing to do with security in it. It was very much an afterthought. Thankfully, it has improved a lot since, but actually one of our senior developers took it upon himself. We just developed our own MCP server.
Okay.
And because the original ones, you had read operations and write operations, and there was no RBAC, so yes, you couldn't control who got what. It was either on or off for everybody.
Yeah.
That meant the agent it was on for the agent to do, had all those write and execute operations, which was a bit risky. So
CTO says no.
we didn't say no. I don't like saying no. I like to find an alternative. So the alternative was that we built our own. And we focused on the read operations initially, just getting everybody that information they needed so they could pull it into the tools. And we've layered on top of that then a solid audit trail, so we know what the agent is doing. We've put rate limiting so that if it does run away, it's not going to get too far. And now we've got those controls in place, we can start opening up the right operations and make sure that even if the AI got manipulated with a prompt injection or something, it's not going to do much damage.
Yeah.
So having that really solid layer, a secure layer to expose the underlying information up to the tools in a robust way, I think has been a real enabler as well. So those stories and tasks that I mentioned that came out of the PRD, developers just in their tool, and they can put in the ticket number and all the information in that, it gets pulled straight into their development environment. It's in the context window, and they can they're ready to start developing.
Yeah, there's another piece around the security layer within that, which is validation. So you've got the reputable right. So like, you wrote this, you absolutely wrote this, there is no question. You've got the rate limiting piece, but the validation, it's sort of like, you're writing this, why are you writing this? And you almost have an agent that is actually checking, which is also a form of rate limiting, but it actually is a blocker before the write actually occurs, which just kind of challenges the way of thinking, but at the same time, it adds a layer of security. And I think that, I don't know if you've implemented something along those lines.
Do you mean in terms of code review?
It's almost pre-code review. So you could use it as a form of code review. Yeah.
So if it's part of the pull requests. Yeah. So the guys are, we still have the same pull review and code review process. We haven't actually changed that yet. There are more and more code review agents. I think Anthropic released one last week.
Yeah.
More of those are coming on the market. So that is definitely something we need to get more into, because the pace of code coming down the line is increasing, and people are actually getting a bit frustrated now by the amount of code they have to read before it gets approved. So having, I think, a combination of an AI agent that does some of that code review and validation, and then the developer, it highlights then to the developer what areas the person needs to go in and look at and just validate on top of what it has validated.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a combined approach. But you absolutely have to have human eyes on it. You can't just fully trust what the agent is doing.
Yeah, especially when it comes to CRO.
Yeah.
I think that is also a key area in there when you've got regulation. I think to take a note directly out of what you said in one of your articles, you can't say, oh, why? Well, the reason why it's there is because the AI said it was a good idea.
Yeah, that's not going to work. That's not going to fly.
So I think another element just in terms of regulated spaces is move fast and break things. That is being very much an industry kind of norm, especially in the software area. But the detonation radius wasn't particularly big when that was happening. But you're now in a situation where you're moving code very quickly, you're shipping features very quickly. And if there was an issue sort of 3-4 phases back, the detonation on the other side of that can be pretty catastrophic. Also, if the actual AI model, depending on where it is being used, slips off its rails, it can also be quite catastrophic. So, given the regulated industry, how do you feel organizations within regulated industries can mitigate against that risk?
Yeah, it's an interesting problem, I guess, because when you read all the exciting articles and watch all the exciting videos online about the advances in technology and our AI technology and what people are doing with agent swarms and the like of OpenClaw, and it is very exciting.
Boys, it's super exciting stuff.
It is. Well, people are doing some crazy stuff with it in terms of just giving it full access to their inbox and their calendar. So I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. So yeah, look at these ideas. Somebody has to be on the bleeding edge. Somebody has to explore them, and that's where the real innovation is coming from. And then those key ideas get brought back and made more enterprise ready in terms of putting the controls around them. So that there is, all the excitement out on the blogosphere is around that bleeding edge stuff, and when everyone else is, who works, we'll say, in a regulated industry, on a mature product, they're reading all this stuff and they're kind of feeling like they're behind. And really, they're not really behind. They're not necessarily on the bleeding edge, but I think people can definitely be close followers and still put all the right checks and balances in place without hurting innovation and hurting progress. And so I think advice I would give to any organization that works in a regulated space is, the people will probably have seen this already. They're getting more and more requests, more frequent requests for new tools and new MCP servers, and people want these tools to be able to work faster. I think if you were to do anything, just focus on streamlining that risk assessment process and making sure that you can get through those requests to a satisfactory level, but faster than you might have done before. So just streamline the process, get some good templating in there, get a good focus on getting the right answers back to people as soon as possible. Like I said before, I try not to say no when I get a request. If I'm not going to give them a direct yes, it'll be some other compensating controls maybe that they can use in a certain way. They can process certain types of data with it, but not others. And really trying to at least give them a solid alternative they can work with. Yeah, rather than going back with a no, because nobody's. Some people will accept a no. They'll obviously get very frustrated. Some people will try and work around it, and that's obviously where the shadow AI problem comes from. And if we want to avoid that, you need to give people an option to move forward and give them an option to move forward in a safe way.
I think your thinking is very progressive. The typical norm that I see is the senior executives get Copilot, and that's the implementation of AI officially. I think that is horrendously disastrous, and asking for shadow AI to actually flourish in an organization.
Yeah, it's you do have to really understand what people are trying to do and what tools they want to use, and it's sometimes they do ask for things that are genuinely, not the right solution, especially in a regulated space. but more often than not, there is an alternative, a safe alternative, that people can be quite happy with, and does doesn't hinder them in any way.
How do you, in terms of your development team, do you have a sandbox area where you allow the guys to play around with things like OpenClaw? Because again, as you mentioned, that is the bleeding edge. It is coming down the line. You've spoken about MCP and the fact that you did look at it when it was in the bleeding edge space. So is that how you're kind of supporting your acquisition of knowledge?
Yeah, partially. And we've also run hackathon every year for the last 3 years. I think we've had an AI focused hackathon where we'll set up some space, some resource in the clouds that people can go and play with new things and understand what they can do. So yeah, absolutely. Having sandbox areas for experimentation is good. Other ways you can sandbox things are like the developers want to program from the CLI. Like if you open up a CLI coding tool from your C drive, from the root of your C drive, that agent basically has access to everything on your computer. So you need to be obviously very careful around things like that. Dev containers through VS Code is a very useful way of spinning up some of these agentic tools and keeping them sandboxed within a dev container. So they can only operate in that container and whatever drive you mount into it. So that's another approach we've used to just mitigate the risk and make sure people can use these tools safely.
Yeah, that's it. For a regulated industry, I think that's really kind of on the money. And I think you've really kind of articulated the way in which strategy is following the governance route by having the actual boundaries in place from the start and saying, absolutely, there's your place to play, develop everything that you want. And when it's ready for the organization, we can then bring it in at the right time.
Absolutely. And communication is key as well. Having that list of allowed services, what data can go in or out, and making sure that that list is well communicated to people is important. And you can obviously tie it into the AI, responsible AI awareness training program that we have, similar to a security and data awareness program with a separate, just a set of videos that people can watch so that they understand where all the information is about what they can and can't do and what they should and shouldn't do.
There is often this word ethics or ethical AI often thrown around the room. In your view, what is ethical AI and how is it actually executed or implemented into an organization?
So in terms of being ethical, we've really stayed away from using AI in HR.
Okay.
We've just decided, right, that's we don't have that much benefit to just put everything into AI and HR. So they use it for policies, etc. But we don't put personal data into it internally. In terms of our products, patient data is processed through AI. So we have to put a huge focus there on the ethical behavior of the model in that scenario. We have a large eval suite that runs across the product, throwing all sorts of horrendous questions at it to see how does it act. Does it respond in an appropriate way? Does it refuse to respond and just escalates to a member of staff if a patient was to put something in there inappropriate? So it's critical to have a really strong level of eval testing on the model, especially if you're patient facing in a clinical environment.
Yeah. And then that also then ties in very nicely, or has to tie in very nicely, with your privacy controls as well.
Absolutely.
Your fundamental rights impact assessment, although that particular capability or baseline is not available yet from the EU, but principally that does need to come, and will also tie in very nicely with your privacy impact assessments that you will see running as well.
Absolutely. Our DPO has been very busy recently.
I'm sure. Mapping that out and creating the links between AI governance and your privacy governance has to be very, very strong.
Yes, it really does. Yeah, and we've reviewed all our DPIAs and our AI impact assessment and our legitimate interest assessments. So there's been a lot of work just reviewing all those, making sure that they all tie together and that we've all the risks mapped out associated with those.
Yeah. Also, just in terms of actually mapping out the actual process in the actual data flow, I think that is a really interesting element in terms of securing your AI components at a component level as well is when you're actually putting together a data flow map, which would also then inform your privacy components or your privacy governance. That data flow map is critical from a security perspective and also from a ongoing incident response and incident management, because you can actually pinpoint exactly where AI is being used and how it's being used and where you do need a human in the loop. Did you have that same experience when kind of going through that process with your DPO?
Yeah, absolutely. Like when we mapped out any of those data flows, it was immediately you put the data classification on and really understand. So we use the TLP protocol, draft cloud protocol. So anywhere where there's TLP red or amber, that's our sensitive data.
Yep.
We've got to really understand where that's going and have it fully mapped out so that, yeah, like you say, if there was an incident, you understand what is impacted by that.
It's actually super interesting stuff.
It is super. It is.
So just kind of coming to the end, when you're looking at, it is an extension of what we were talking about, the ethical piece, but responsible AI development, I think, also takes it a slightly further level, because you haven't used it within your HR. But when you're thinking about responsible AI development and you're thinking about the future and where AI can come into your organization, what are the written guardrails that you've kind of put in place? You've spoken about the HR piece, but where is the red line essentially? And it doesn't have to be for your organization; it can be from a wider industry perspective. In fact, I'd like you to kind of take that wider industry lens on. Is sort of like, where do you feel responsible AI sits, and what forums potentially is it actually most spoken about in your area?
Yeah, for us, like as we've developed the GRC program across the security and data privacy, like it really comes back to that data classification piece, and that's the bit that it always, once I see TLP red going into any new system or any new, or would be utilized by a model, that just raises literally a red flag in my brain where I'm thinking like, is this the right thing to do? And I've often heard over the years when we're talking about which data attributes flow to which part of the system, someone may go, "Oh, it'd be useful to have that later on, like we may do analytics on that later on," or something like that, right? And once I hear that, then it's a firm no. Unless you're certain you need that data in there, it's not going in there, right? Because you have to have that data minimization concept around it, where you are only processing it literally, what you absolutely need. So I think you do have that as a red line. I think you have to just say you're not going to process anything that you don't need. And that flows right through into AI, in terms of what you're going to give the model. You've obviously been a non-deterministic system. You're not really sure how it's going to impact. And if that has any link to a person, then, it's just unpredictable what could go wrong. So it's staying away from that and protecting yourself there, I think, is critical.
That is such a fantastic practical example of responsible AI development. Love it. Thank you, Declan. And in closing, I've got one last final question, and this is kind of looking across at Irish leaders. So if you could leave one thought with Irish leaders around the future of AI, what would it be?
I think something that's not talked about enough, and that we've started talking a bit about recently, is how do you train people and give them a vision for where their careers can go. All right, everyone's a little bit, apprehensive about what the impact of AI is going to be on their job, future role, etc. A lot of people identify very firmly with what they've been doing for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. A lot of those people are going to have to change their mindset around how they work. And I think there needs to be a much stronger focus on how we prepare people and arm people with the right skills and mindset to navigate this period of transformation. As exciting as it is in general for humanity, and I think there's going to be a lot of good comes out of it, we have to prepare people better for this period, because it is going to be disruptive. And I think if we do that, we'll all navigate it very successfully.
Amazing. Tekla?
Thank you very much. Been a lot.